Okay, everyone, I'm popping in here. This is like a walk with Walsh, sober open mic. And I know I've recorded a couple of really intense videos the last couple of days about the seminary, rehab, my own suffering, and my holding back on who I am and holding back on taking an emotional risk when it comes to being passionate about something. Because the last time I did that, it seemed to not work out. I seemed to be rejected even by the highest level of what I thought existed, right? But I've also told you about my dad in his wheelchair in Ponoka. And so Dad would say, "I love you, Michael." And Dad had a brain injury. Dad was like a child in his mental capacity. But the purity of that was, he said, "I love you, Michael." It's sort of like my niece Maggie looking up at me and saying, "Mike, Uncle Mike." Same level of purity, no thoughts, there's no filter, there's no inhibition, there's just what I feel, what I say, what's true. And I was walking, and I had this thought this morning in my place, that my dad saying "I love you," I felt like God was saying it too. And that through all of these circumstances that have been very painful for me, the seminary, the addiction, bipolar, diabetes, tragedy, my dad, it's almost like I can hear God saying nothing more than that. Just "I love you." That's it. That's enough. That's it. You're enough. Just the way you are. As if that's the only message. And then, so I don't even know how to get into this, because it's just so simple, right? And people have different beliefs around God, who God is, spirituality, religion, are we tied all together, and all these things. And today I just had this overwhelming sense. I was walking in the sunshine, got the red loafers on, and I heard God say it too, right? I didn't hear it, I'm not hearing voices, but I pictured Dad saying it. And I even talked more to my dad. I was like, what else would I want to say to Dad? And Dad had nothing to say back but "I love you." Just that one moment. And God saying it too. So it's almost like the last 4 weeks of sharing my story have allowed me to heal. So I'm getting this healing inside, and I almost felt God saying, "I'm sorry." And I'm tearing up behind these sunglasses, but it was like God saying, "I'm sorry, Michael. I'm sorry they did that to you. I'm sorry you were made to feel that way. I love you. And I always loved you, and I never loved you more or less at any point in this story, in your rehab, in your rehabilitation, and I always loved you the same amount, and I wanted the most for you the whole way." I know maybe these are seeds I've planted by going through my healing journey, but whatever you believe about religion and spirituality, I think that is the purest form. And then we put all kinds of filters on it and try and explain rule systems and sin and all these stories and Jesus. And I mean, Jesus is great. I love Jesus too, right? Great guy, great story. He's the Son of God, all these things. Perfect, beautiful. And we can go in depth. He's the manifestation of God's love and everything. But really, it's simpler than that. And we make it so complex. And I almost found myself thinking, maybe I need to forgive God. And that's a crazy thing to say to most people, right? Because they're like, "Well, no, you're the bad. It's you that's the problem. It's you ask for forgiveness." And I felt myself just forgiving God, and God saying, "I love you," And I think that's a crazy concept that I almost didn't say it on this video, because I'm like, that's wild. And I'm so grateful. I had a call today with a lady that I'm going to be working with, and we were talking about just some random work stuff, and then I shared with her a couple things about me, and then she shared all this stuff about her, and then suddenly we were down this amazing rabbit hole of vulnerability and our stories, and she shared with me that she had a cousin who died from suicide, and he was bipolar. And it's funny because when I was hearing the story, I felt so sad, right? He went to rehab and he committed suicide after that. And of course, there's way more to this person's story. But her response to my story was, hey, thank you for sharing, because that gives me hope, right? Because I have it too. I have a mental health condition, and for me now, I got the help that I needed, and I'm living this really healthy life, you know. And speaking of mental health, like the last 4 weeks have felt, or have, you know, could seem like what in the past was hypomania in my life. And you know, I've explained this before, but hypomania is like an elevated sense of self. You start doing more than you normally do. You don't need sleep, these things. And I've had to even check in with my sister in the last few weeks and say, hey, and she just cuts me off. She's like, no, you're excited about your life. You're happy. You're good. And that's what I wanted to share with you. The idea that we say God is love, right? But the problem with any word is our definition of that word, our belief about that word and ourself, is how we'll receive that statement. But it's that simple. So I'm just walking. I'm thinking about the last couple videos I made. I'm thinking about the power of me realizing that I've been holding back in my life for the past few years, and even since 2008, because the last time that I just went all in for something that was bigger than me, I got really traumatically hurt and affected. But now I'm ready to take that risk again, right? It's almost like someone who dates and then has a really bad relationship and gets divorced, and then, you know, they need time, and maybe they never heal even. And I'm not saying I'm fully healed, but I feel ready to go. Like, let's put the foot on the gas and let's just see what happens again. With something I'm connected to that's meaningful and affecting people. So it may seem like I have all these stories about people I'm connecting with lately, but the reason those things are happening is because I'm sharing so freely with people. Like it's like the vulnerability that people are scared to have is this thing that creates amazing connections, because then it creates safety with other people. They can be who they are, and they can share, and then you hear their passions and you hear their. Anyway, I'm going off. It's time to eat something, but just leave this conversation thinking about, without all the rules systems and all the black and white and all the all or nothing and all the concepts of faith and religion that are passed down to us that, you know, are sometimes archaic, and they may still serve a purpose. But at the end of the day, if we believe that God is this almost undefinable being, you know, undefinable, right? Like, we define God through human terms, which sort of means that we actually can't define what God is or who God is, because it's so much greater than us. And so maybe that's why God is love, because love is the emotion we want the most. And you have to find it in yourself, and maybe that's where you connect. And maybe God is you. This doesn't mean it's like some philosophical change in the separation of us versus what a universal being is, but I think it's a really good start. And I got a quote this week from a person that I was working with in the job that I do, and we were sharing our stories, and he had a lot of trauma too, and he's a Christian, but he's like, you know, Michael, religion is the trauma of the limited human mind trying to understand God. And God is so often defined through our experiences. And maybe God is just love. I love you, Michael. Try and say it to yourself. And if you can't say it, obviously change the name. If you can't say it, see if you could take one step to looking into why you can't say that about yourself. Sober Walsh.